11 desktops, one old tower, two all-in-ones, couple of monitors, A3 printer and a box of parts. Yeah, we have an awful lot to get through today. This is part 2 of the mother lode pickup. If you haven't seen part 1, maybe go and take a look at that first. In that video we looked at the Amigas, Amstrads, Apples and a Bull terminal. I did say in that we had looked at all the Amstrads, but when moving the x86 machines out here, I found another one. This is an Amstrad PC7 386SX80. Let's take it apart and take a look. So one very compact little desktop and complete with its keyboard. Although this isn't anything special, those just feel like rubber domes. Where does the keyboard connect though? Well, you see this cable disappearing underneath the front. In a very Atari ST style, the accessory connectors are located underneath here. PC speaker is also hiding in there. We're missing a foot though. It does tend to rattle a bit, but we should be able to fix that easily enough. Thought this is interesting, a little repair sticker. This system was in for repair on the 17th, not sure if that's the 4th or the 8th, and 93. Exit icon, something on games, not sure what that says. Well, regardless, let's just take this apart. Now, the one thing we're going to be looking for in all these systems really is batteries. Leaky batteries is probably the primary reason for problems with computers of this era, late 80s, early 90s. That's when most of these systems are from. And unfortunately, we have a barrel battery in here which has very obviously leaked. In terms of the rest of the system then, we have a fairly integrated motherboard, onboard VGA, 2 memory modules installed, and I guess I would assume 1 megabyte of RAM total. Space here for a 387 coprocessor. I don't see the 386 itself, so presumably it's hiding underneath those drives. Nice compact little machine. Would be nice to try and build a little system out of this. Just let me get rid of that battery quickly. It's not a Varda for a change. Rather, this is a GS Saft. No idea. Never heard of that battery manufacturer, but just like all the rest, it has leaked and caused some damage. Definitely a few traces there are going to have problems, and possibly a few vias as well. They look rather nasty, but all that's for a future video. For now, I'm just going to button it up again and note it as having battery damage. Next up then is a Zenith Data Systems, also with its matching keyboard. Funny how the keys have yellowed differently. Still feels like rubber domes, but this keyboard is manufactured by Cherry. Now despite that, as I say, those do not feel like mechanical switches. There's no telltale click when you push them. They really do feel like rubber. It does look like a switch. It just doesn't feel like one. The system itself has its AT keyboard connector on the front, 3.5 inch floppy drive and room for another. Presumably the hard drive might be sitting in there behind that. Almost satisfying power switch on the side. Just not quite the clunkiness of the classic IBMs. But let's get it apart and check for batteries. Well, yes, we have a set of batteries hiding up here, but thankfully it looks as if they haven't leaked. Regardless of that, we will get them out of there. 6-volt battery. It hasn't leaked, but it has definitely swollen, so it wasn't far away from spilling its guts. A lot of dust to see in here as well. So this little machine has obviously had a hard enough life. 4 memory modules this time, although given the size of them and the lack of chips on them, I dare say each of those is only 256k, and we're still looking at just 1 meg total. This is interesting, isn't it? Some sort of daughter card. Let's see if we can get that off. And this is a 286 CPU daughter card. There's the chip itself, 12 megahertz. Space for the code processor. It does actually look like we have a little bit of corrosion or oxidization or something on this actual socket here. And you can maybe see it more clearly on that side of it. Wonder if we just sprayed a little bit of contact cleaner in here. Try to give that a little bit of a clean. I wonder could we maybe get this system to power on. I'm not going to be totally reckless and just jump in. I have pulled the multimeter out, tested for shorts first of all on the motherboard, just in case there was a tantalum or something gone. No, all that's fine. Also just want to check the voltages coming out of this power supply. 5 volts, 5 volt and 5 volt. I'm assuming that's meant to be negative 12, negative 10.8. Plus 12 you'd assume, that's okay. And another 5 volt. Right, let's give it a go. Monitor on. Let's see what she says. Not a lot. No video signal. No tones out of the speaker. Nothing. Oh well, that's a bit disappointing. It might need its battery installed to post. Some of these old machines were a bit fussy like that, but you would like to think it would be trying to tell us something anyway. Well, anyway, that's all we can do for now. Plenty more systems to look at. Let's grab the next one. Hold that thought, it just started. All it did was just push all the socketed chips, reseat the RAM and that daughter card again. Away it went. It's looking us to press escape to continue. Let's try that and see what happens. I wonder will it boot to its hard drive. So it's throwing a disk error, drive not ready. And then drops us into a command prompt of some form. Question mark for help. Yes, please. So presumably some sort of inbuilt test program on ROM. We can test. Keyboard test. Oh, that's pretty cool. Each character we press is just being displayed over the full screen. Disk read test, well there's not much point in doing that because the hard drive isn't set up. And I don't much fancy trying that floppy drive. I dare say it needs a really good clean. So, pretty cool little system. I'll need to figure out how much RAM is actually in here. The hard drive type, I need to pull the drive out to see what that is. There's quite a few to pick from and I don't fancy just doing trial and error. It all seemingly works though, so that's good. I was getting a bit worried there for a minute when there was no signs of life, but obviously just a bad connection somewhere. Let's move on to the next one. And the next one in no particular order is this. It is missing its complete front cover though, but the only reason I'm not scrapping this machine is because it's an IBM. Now I'm not actually sure what model this is, but if anyone knows, maybe let me know and then I can go about trying to find the front cover. Integrated SCSI by the looks of it, VGA. Serial port with a few pins missing, parallel, and just the usual PS2 for keyboard and mouse. A little bit of rust down there, which is kind of worrying. Hopefully that's not a sign of internal battery damage. Speaking of which, let's get it apart. The question is though, how? Because I don't see any screws anywhere. And I'll say one thing for it, this is built like a tank. Well, the top cover just slides off. That is easy enough. Copyright 1991, and this has me slightly confused because what type of slots are they? Are those two PCI? They almost look like PCI, but are they too short? PCI slot is 85mm, and those are only 80mm. This one has me confused. If anyone knows anything about this, please let me know. The system has obviously been pillaged, all the memory's missing. Still has its big old hard drive. Floppy drive's missing, but at least we do have the cover for it. And it looks as if we've got the button for the floppy drive. And processor, Intel 386SX. Another 386. Not much point in trying to power this system on, I don't think. We can't obviously try to power them all on. We're what, over 10 minutes into this, and this is only the third one. Quite a bit yet to get through. Another Zenith Data Systems Z Select ES. This one, however, compared to the last, this one just screams budget computer to me. Even the case badge is loose. Everything about it just seems quite flimsy. It actually looks very familiar. Reminds me of a Packard Bell. Let's take it apart. Might be a toolless entry. Those two lift up, and no, there's little screws in there. Yep, this all looks very familiar. That is exactly the same motherboard that was in an old Packard Bell system I had many moons ago. Although the motherboard in that was completely toast from battery damage. Where's the battery in this one? Same location you would assume. And oh dear. This one has suffered. The battery leakage is quite severe, unfortunately. Yeah. This is just as bad as the old Packard Bell was that I had once. I don't think we'll be able to repair this, to be honest with you. There are a lot of very fine traces around this whole area. And the battery leakage does extend underneath where the floppy drive is here. And that's where there is some onboard memory. Everything is very green and crusty down in there. I think this one might be beyond it. The CPU then, let's see if we can't get the cooler off. Yep, just snapped off. 46 DX2 50. So 25 MHz front side bus in here. Doubled up to give us the 50 MHz CPU clock. Bit of a shame the motherboard is beyond it, but there was bound to be a few with killer battery damage, wasn't there? Interesting actually, the other Packard Bell I had with the same battery damage on it had an SX2 50 MHz 486. Oh well. We can always recover the hard drive, floppy drive, obviously the processor, and at least I've got a pile more jumpers to go around. That riser card might come in handy as well somewhere, along with the RAM sockets, things like that. A CompuAdd 325S. Never heard of this system manufacturer, but a wee computer is complete with its matching keyboard. Doesn't feel too bad. They're not mechanical switches again, but yeah, you could happily type on that. 3.5 inch and 5.25 inch floppy drives, complete with discs. What's this? Dr. Solomon's Magic Bullet. Some sort of virus scanning software. And this Sound Master Plus program disc. Copyright Kovacs. Is that like the Kovacs speech thing? And there's a Sound Master, a take on that. This disc though is in a bad shape. I can actually see the mold growing on the surface of it. Can't even rotate it. You can see it there. That disc is beyond it, I would think. And speaking of things in a bad shape, look at the rust on this. It gets even worse when we look underneath. Is it just surface rust? Or has something caused it? Like batteries? Let's get the lid off. This screw here is really tight. I can see rust on the threads of it. I'm worried we're going to have a horror show in here when we finally get this open. Oh dear, look at that. My goodness. Crusty. Yep. Has a telltale sign of leaky batteries. And I dare say that is the guilty party right there. Yep. Leads just fall off. But saying that, and looking at the motherboard, I don't see any corrosion on it. There is our matching Kovacs card matched to this disc. So obviously our Sound Master Plus. I don't think that disc will read, although I suppose I could try to clean it. Almost a full complement of memory. Bank 0, 1 and 2 are all filled. Possibly 3 megabytes of RAM. Or maybe even 6. What is the spec of this system though? Where's the processor? Is it hiding away down in there? And it's another 386 SX. I would try to power this system on, but just with the extent of all that, it's really hard to see down in here just with all these drives in the way. Give me a minute to try and strip this down a bit further. No, I think I'll just leave it. There is corrosion on the motherboard just at this point here, just in there. So I would want to treat that before trying to power this on. The hard drive also hasn't got away with it totally. It does have this plastic shield on the bottom of it, luckily enough, but just along the edges of that I can see some corrosion on the board of that. So in the very least, I would like to get this working long enough to get any drivers or anything off it, especially drivers for that Kovacs card. I dare say the power supply has also suffered internally just because the battery was sitting there and the cooling fence for the power supply are right beside that, so we'd need to have a good look in there as well. All in all, an interesting wee system though. Definitely want to try and get this one up and running at some point. Let's start looking at the compacts. Now, the compact range of computers, for whatever reason, I don't really hold much nostalgia for them. You know, they're no different than any other mass-produced computer, Packard Bell, Hewlett Packard, whatever. Compact though, I don't know, it just doesn't gel with me really. So we have a ProLina 4/25S and a Guess 486 25 MHz SX. No expansion cards to speak of. Let's take it apart. Now these things use Torx screws rather than Phillips head. And I suppose at least they are kind enough to mark the screws that we need to take out. Little arrow. So yep, just as I thought, 46SX, 25 megahertz. And just a bog basic machine. There is no memory installed, albeit it does look like there's a few memory chips mounted on the motherboard. At a guess, 4 megabytes. Interesting little detail there. Someone skiing imprinted onto the motherboard. Hard drive, floppy drive and space for a 5 1/4 inch offering. Suppose if we built this, I would probably stick a CD drive in there. In terms of battery, it's a lithium coin cell, so no leakage to worry about. Let's see if we could power it on quickly. Monitor on. Hopefully it works. Noisy enough hard drive, but it is spinning up. And 4 megabytes total system memory. So the battery is obviously dead and it's lost its settings for the hard drive. There's a little sticker here that tells me it's 120 megabytes, but it doesn't tell me what type. There's 121.4. I would have to pull the hard drive out to be able to get the information on heads, cylinders, sectors. Must be the wrong settings. I think we'll just leave it at that. But at least the system works, and for once, no battery damage to deal with in here. Compact Presario 7150. If I asked you to draw me a very simple picture of a very generic mid-90s desktop, this is what you'd draw me. This system though is missing its CD drive and floppy drive. Let's see if we can't get into it and see if anything else is missing. We've got a modem this time. Looks like there should have been a screw there to hold the case together, but that's gone, so yep, it just wants to come apart. The first PCI slots we have seen. This is a socket 5. What's the processor? And we have a Pentium. Wonder is this one of the earlier higher voltage Pentiums. I think they ran at 5 volts, whereas all the rest, the more newer ones, ran at 3.3. Some sort of like grease on the top of that. That's strange. And this is a Pentium 75. 4 memory sticks installed. 2 single-sided, 2 double-sided. Not a guess. 8 megabyte of RAM total. It does still have its hard drive, a Seagate with capacity of 545.5 megabytes. It's got a Dallas real-time clock, which is soldered onto the board. I think you can still buy replacements for them. So, no doubt the battery that's part of that chip has died. But if we could get a replacement, just desolder that and stick the new one on. Integrated VGA, like most of these systems. An S3 Trio 64 chipset. Presumably 1 megabyte of RAM standard and space for another one. I know I'm giving these compacts a bit of a hard time, but I suppose it is a decent enough wee system. This is the last compact system we have, and possibly the most interesting one. A compact Desk Pro 38620E. Obviously 386 processor, presumably 20 megahertz. Not sure what the E is all about. Would be nice if this was a 386DX system rather than SX. They've all been SX so far. Nice clunky power switch in this one. 3.5 inch floppy. Space there for what looks like one of those slimline 5 1/4 inch floppy drives. If that is the case, it's a real shame it's not in there, because those drives are quite hard to come by. And then just a full size 5¼ inch bay as well. Turning to the rear then, very much like all the rest of the systems, integrated motherboard. We have VGA built in, serial, parallel, and PS2 for keyboard and mouse. There is one expansion card here though, and to me that looks like a Microsoft import for a compatible mouse. Makes you wonder why someone would bother with that when there's PS2 mouse built in. Potential problems here though, a lot of rust down the side of the case. So are we looking at another battery nightmare? Let's find out. You can't see anything, can you? The power supply runs the full side of the case there. Well, I can't see sign of any battery, so we may have to strip this thing down a bit further and try to get this center section out here. This carries the floppy drive and the hard drive. Presumably any battery is underneath that. What we can see though is our expansion card, and as I thought, yep, that is a Microsoft import. So why would someone have went to the trouble of installing this when there is a PS2 mouse port on the motherboard? And I can just about see the processor down in there, and I'm fairly sure, yes, it is a full 386DX, which is pretty cool. Let me see if I can get this out, then we'll give you a better look at it and hopefully find the root of that rust. Hopefully it's not a leaky battery. Well, with the drive enclosure out of the way, we can see that whatever caused that rust certainly wasn't the battery anyway, because we have another Dallas real-time clock chip, and luckily enough this time it's in a socket, or well, appears to be anyway. It's well on there though. Another daughter card here, wonder what that is. Take that off in a minute for a look, but I would hazard guess it is some sort of memory expansion. There's our processor, 386DX25. This chip sitting beside it is just a bus controller. There is an empty socket down in there, which you can't see just now. That's for the 387 coprocessor. So while I was giving Compacts a bit of a hard time earlier, I think this is actually a pretty cool wee system. Let's see if we can't take this out and see what it is. A memory expansion, 4 meg DRAM. That is pretty cool. Dated 1987. 4 meg RAM in 1987. I'm sure this cost a pretty penny when this was new. Okay, she's all back together. I dare say we have a good chance of seeing fireworks here, just given the age of this thing. Let's see what's going to happen. Something went bang, and whatever it was, it came out of the power supply. I wonder, is our rust down here maybe caused by leaking capacitors in the power supply? Because I know where capacitor leakage does get bad enough, it can cause a short. So let's just turn that off, pull that out, get the lid back on this and move on to the next one. More investigation required on this in the future. Interesting wee system, so definitely we'll be coming back to it. Well, this thing certainly is a bit of an oddball. Very funny shaped case. Big power switch there, and big fake turbo and big fake reset switches down here. Why would you even do that? I have no idea. In fact, look at that. There's a little mark on the inside of that. I wonder, is that the switch in there? Yes, it is. The mind boggles. I have no idea. This funky looking molded thing here with a handle on it. Removable hard drive caddy. No drive in this. I wonder will there be another hard drive inside the machine somewhere. This definitely looks out of place. So possibly might have been a CD drive here or something and someone's robbed that out of it. Floppy drive sits vertically in there and we're missing the button. An interesting feature of this case, other than the funky looking front, is this removable section here to let you into the expansion cards. Just like that. And we have one ISA VGA card. There's our processor down there. It's ST486DX266. PCI slots on this 486 motherboard. But I think I just see something down there that might be kind of interesting. You see those chips sitting just above the processor socket? You might think those are cache, but nope. Those are fake. They say write back cache on them. And they're exactly the same as the fake ones we took off the PC chips motherboard last year. On that other board we were able to replace them for real cache chips. It'll be interesting to see if we could do the same on this one. And yes, there is another hard drive in this machine, so the removable caddy, obviously just for hot swapping. There's no RAM to be seen, that's been stripped out of it. And the battery in here, it's another coin cell, so nothing to worry about there. And look what's on the side of the case. PC World Quality Service Promise. Was this machine purchased from PC World? They're still going today, actually. Well, it's now just Curry's. It's all under the Dixon's group. But a machine sold with fake cache chips in it by a major UK retailer, possibly. That's not good. A Commodore, big box Commodore, the one thing I have always wanted. Well, okay, yeah, what I really want is a big box Commodore Amiga. This is a Commodore 286-16. This thing hasn't yellowed though. This thing has gone full David Dickinson mode. This thing has turned orange. There's the colour it's meant to be in there. Not a lot happening on the front here. Reset and turbo. 3.5-inch floppy drive with space for another one below it. The styling here with these lines across it sort of resembles the big box Amigas. The back of the case is pretty typical. Keyboard, mouse, parallel port and 2 serial ports built onto the motherboard. And then we have one expansion card with VGA. This is rather worrying though. Rust on these, but also green. And you should know by now, when you see green, that means battery leakage. We'll need to take this VGA card out for a better look, but I can already see green nastiness on these pin headers. Oh no. It's bad. It's really, really bad. Out of all the machines we have, this is one of the ones that I was hoping was going to be good. So this whole area here, very heavy corrosion. They're all very fine traces, and all the vias are completely gone by the looks of them. So if we did want to try and fix this, all of that would have to come off, including these 2 packages here. And the legs of them are in terrible condition. Terrible condition. So even getting them off without causing damage to the board, or if these even still work, anyone's guess. I really am developing a dislike of barrel batteries. I hate to say it, but I think this one's beyond it as well. Traces are actually just disappearing as you touch them. Random thought, but since that motherboard in there is most likely beyond it, I wonder could we modify the back of this case create a complete new backplane and fit an Amiga motherboard in there. That's an A500 motherboard, and I dare say we could make that work. That would be an interesting wee project, and I would finally get my big box Amiga, sort of. Well, we're finally getting to the end of the desktops. This is the last one, and they say you should save the best for last. This is no exception. An Olivetti personal computer M280. What I expect to find in here is a 12 MHz 286 system, but let's just take a second to appreciate the size of this thing. This is ridiculous. Sitting, what, 180 millimeters tall? Certainly the biggest desktop I have ever seen. And it's complete with its monochrome composite monitor and its original keyboard, and thankfully so, because it uses a proprietary connector for the keyboard. This itself is nothing special though, just rubber domes like all the rest, although it is really nice to have this complete with the machine. The monitor, I dare say it's a 12-inch monochrome display, and given the tint on the screen there, I think it's probably a green phosphor. Can't wait to get into this thing. On the rear of the case, we've got the power supply on this side, and that is our keyboard connector down in there. Integrated on the motherboard then is just parallel and serial. And then we do have one expansion card here for video, obviously giving us our composite outputs, but also you would assume this is an RGB output, maybe CGA, or possibly Hercules like the vanilla PC was. Has taken a bit of a knock here. There's a wee bank of jumper switches there. They've been pushed back in by someone. Well, this is certainly different than anything else we've looked at today. First things first, battery. Yes, there's one in there, but thankfully no signs of leakage whatsoever. That's good. We have two expansion cards, one 16-bit ISA card. This looks like an MFM and floppy controller. There is the 3.5-inch floppy drive here, and sitting at the bottom of the case below that is a rather beefy looking 5.25-inch MFM hard drive. Our display adapter, I can see a Paradise chip on it, but can't see an awful lot more. That jumper block that I thought had maybe been pushed back, no, it's meant to be like that. There's something of interest though, one exploded tantalum capacitor. So I think just with that, we'll not do any more to this system today. That will need a bit of investigation to see why that exploded. Probably just its time. Its power supply certainly is a bit of an oddity. Ground and 5-volt rails across to the motherboard are by means of these rather heavy cables. I don't see the likes of your usual AT connector. It does have the typical Molex for the drives, but that seems to be it. And what you're looking at down there is not actually the motherboard. That in itself is just a big daughter card with the ISA slots on it. You see, the motherboard sits in here at this level. Then that daughter card is plugged into it through a small riser, and then obviously the expansion cards are plugged into that. But I wonder how we get into the motherboard. Could it be as simple as flip all this upside down and then the bottom comes off? Let's just see. Oh yes. Thank you, Olivetti engineers. Is this going to let us into the motherboard? There she is. Now that's what I call a motherboard. This thing could be kind of difficult to diagnose if there's any problems. There's a 24 megahertz crystal there. So you would expect that's divided by 2 to give us our 12 megahertz clock. And presumably what we have here is the processor. Not sure how to get into that. This looks like some sort of heatsink arrangement on the top of it. And these wee layers here are built up just to make contact with the bottom of the case, just for a bit of heat dissipation. Lots of baud wires. And presumably that is all our memory there. Might be 1 megabyte, you know, just given the quantity of chips. But as I say, it's all for another day. So the tower then, this is an old server, and you know it means business when it's got wheels on it. It's got this odd door on the front, which obviously needs adjusted, because I assume it's meant to stay up like that, but it's feeling a bit tired. And behind there, CD drive, tape drive, obviously for backup, and floppy drive, power switch. I think the back of this machine is quite interesting because it gives us some idea about what we might find inside. The fact that the serial and parallel are not integrated to the motherboard. The VGA connector is the correct way around, so that must be an ISA slot. And this looks like a connector for external SCSI, so you would assume, well, you would assume being a server anyway, all the drives inside are SCSI. So I think what we have here is a 486, but let's take it apart and find out. So yes, there are 3 hard drives installed here, and they are all SCSI. CD drive is SCSI as well, as is that tape drive. The ribbon cable's been disconnected, but it's lying in the bottom of the case here, and thankfully it has a terminator on it. Equally, the power has all been disconnected, and someone has had the RAM out of this machine. That's missing. It's got brown ISA slots. I wonder, are they the EISA standard? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But one thing it definitely does have is VLB. So that's pretty cool. Dallas real-time clock as well, so while that is probably dead, at least there's no leaky batteries to worry about. The processor seems to be on this separate card here, and it does have some cache alongside it, which looks like it's real this time. Need to get that rail out to get to the processor card. How does that come out though? Well, finally got the processor card out. 256k of cache, just in case you're wondering. As for the processor itself though, I can't get this heatsink off it. I have tried twisting it to see if it'll snap off, but it doesn't want to budge, and I don't want to force it too hard. Equally, I can't seem to get the processor out of this socket. And I don't see any means here of releasing the tension on that socket. Anyone know how to remove the chip from that type of socket? I wonder if we could get this thing to post. That would be one way of figuring out what this is. As for our drop down door mechanism, it works on this actuator here with this arm and then this bit of wire, which I think has just fell out of its guide, because with the door fully up, this thing is hanging loose. So let me see if I can figure out where that's meant to go. Ah, found it already. You probably won't be able to see it, but there is a pulley in there. This is meant to be wrapped around the top of that. Let me see if I can fish that back into position. Well, I did try to fix the door, but I think the wire has just jumped off that little pulley again. The problem though, I think, is that the wee actuator arm that holds the tension on it, it's just tired. I dare say we could replace it with a spring though, but that's for another time. For now, I have the machine all hooked up again. Power's all connected, SCSI cable is in, floppy drive is reconnected, and I stuck just a generic 16 meg SIM in there. I wonder if it will work. Now, there are a lot of tantalum capacitors on this board, so very, very possible we're going to get more fireworks. Nothing. So there was a bit of a noise coming out of it there, almost as if something was trying to turn, but no action. I dare say our power supply is bad. That would be my guess. So the first of our all-in-ones, this is a Packard Bell Spectria, black Intel inside sticker, so I would guess we have a 486 system here. This is very resemblant of the first computer I ever owned. That was a Packard Bell. We had that back in 96, I think it was, albeit it was a separate desktop and monitor. Although the styling of it is identical, it's almost as if Packard Bell just took their monitor, cut the stand off it and glued it onto the top of one of their cases. It has yellowed quite a bit, as you can see, and the speaker grills have started to rust, so a little bit of restoration would be required here. And then further evidence to the fact that they just took a monitor and glued it onto the top of a desktop is the fact that we still have a monitor cable running externally. Only the one power input though. And getting the motherboard and all out of here is just as simple as removing those two screws and pull. So yes, it is a 486 class system, socket 3, but check it out. Intel Overdrive CPU. This thing must have been upgraded at one point in its life. Just the single memory module in there, 8 megabytes perhaps, and it's got the fairly typical Packard Bell branded crystal sound card. As for battery, there's a little coin cell hiding down in there. But the question is, does it work? Well, it came up, reports the CPU as a 486DX475, and yeah, we've got a total of 8 megabytes of RAM. Let's just jump into the BIOS quickly. It's reading the hard drive as 0 megabytes. That's better. Let's see if we can get it to boot to that hard drive. Doesn't look like it. Operating system not found. So the second of our all-in-ones and the last system from the mother Lode pickup. This is a Fujitsu ICL PC TV. But what separates this from the likes of the Packard Bell all-in-one is that while in this bottom section here we do have a PC, the top half isn't just a monitor, it is also a TV. There's an analog tuner built in here, plus a SCART socket on the back, composite input and whatnot, so a fully fledged TV up here. One thing that I think is a bit odd though, is that you can't have the TV on without the computer. So there's the screen coming to life, as is the PC. One thing that's missing for me though is the remote control, and just from these controls on the front, I have no means of switching this from its tuner to its PC input. I can't even switch it to the SCART input. All we can do is move between the analog channels. This button here doesn't seem to do very much either. Just moving through the UHF channels. And that's just the volume. Now I have tried one of these universal remote controls with all the Fujitsu codes that I could find, but no joy. So has anyone any ideas about how I might be able to get this thing to work? Other than trying to find a genuine remote control, which, let's be honest, is rather unlikely. It's going to have to be one of these universal things. So anyone any ideas of codes to try? So if we just take a quick look at the back of the system, there's our SCART socket, our composite and audio in and out, plus our aerial input. And then down here we have the PC, PS2 keyboard and mouse, serial, parallel, and the VGA. But like the Packard Bell again, it's a separate cable. taking that VGA signal up to the monitor. And I suppose, thinking about it, it isn't actually a bad idea, that, because if you wanted to add a better graphics card into one of the expansion slots, saves you mucking about with any internal wiring. Just pull that off and reconnect it up here. Now the specs for this system, looking online, would suggest that it's a 486. However, the fact that there's a date on here of February 1997, well, I'm not so sure. Although Pat tested, maybe that's just a test sticker from 1997. Maybe it's that date, 95, that more applies to the age of the machine. And unfortunately, I can't even take it apart to show you what's inside it, because I have tried to get in here, but it's locked. And unfortunately, I can't find a key to open this. I've even tried 3D printing just like a blank to force into here to try and wiggle it open, but nope, it does not want to release. Taking all those screws out doesn't show you very much other than a lot of metal. I think the way you get the system out of this is that it pulls out the front, and you can see it starts to go there. There is a little bit of movement in it, but then it just stops, and I'm fairly confident it's being held by that lock on the back. So this certainly is a very, very interesting little system, but it's going to be very much dependent on whether we can get a suitable remote control and if I can somehow get that lock open. In the meantime though, I wonder if we hooked up an external VGA monitor to that output, could we at least see this system post to get some idea of its spec. Monitor hooked up. Let's see if we get an image. Yep. And we have a DX266 CX. This is Cyrix chip with 8 megabytes of RAM. So it's only got a 335 megabyte hard drive in here. That is a lot smaller than I was expecting. Let's see if she'll boot. Yep, and she is booting into DOS. And we're getting Windows 3.11. Welcome, please type your name, bum chums. Oh my goodness. How do we get out of this? I'm going to have to hook up a mouse. So even with the mouse connected now, we can't get any further than this. It's almost as if whatever bit of software this is crashing. As it just says here, if you'd rather use Windows Program Manager, click this button. So presumably you're supposed to click that to exit back just to Windows. But if we just hold down Shift, we can get it to boot without the autoexec.bat. There we are. What's on our hard drive? Not an awful lot. Windows, Encarta, MS Works, ICL apps, maybe some software specific to this machine, tvtune.exe. Maybe you can watch TV on Windows using the tuner in the system. So some more investigation required for this little system, but it's not going to be much use unless we can figure out a remote control. Well, that's the mother load of pickups. The other items which I haven't showed you are this IBM monitor and that Olivetti monitor on the floor. Both just VGA monitors, but both don't work. The IBM starts up for a split second, then switches off. The Olivetti starts up just with a very high pitched squeal, so definite problems in both of them. There's also this A3 OKI Microline 321 Elite printer, dot matrix printer. It does start up and initialize. You can feed paper through it and whatnot, but the rail on there that the head moves back and forward on, like last time in the Amstrad printer, it has rusted quite severely. The head gets snagged on that and the printer just locks up. There is also a box of parts on the floor. Well, I say parts, it's mostly just floppy disks, but we do have one socket 7 motherboard. There's a CD drive, hard drive, and the only card of any real interest is a Creative Sound Blaster 16. And then hiding down in the corner, down in there, is another monochrome monitor. Green phosphor again. That one does work, although there is also a terrible high-pitched squeal off that the whole time while running. So again, some investigation required. But that's it. The only question that remains is, in what order do I try to tackle all this? While I would love to jump into the likes of that Olivetti M280, I think first and foremost we need to tackle where there's damage, be that battery damage or leaky capacitors. So of all the systems that you've seen here, where would you like me to start? But for now, that's it. So if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up, as it does really help the channel. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? Still plenty more yet to come here on CRG. There's an absolute pile of it right here. And I'll see you next time.